everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, in the miracle of all summer miracles, I am bringing you a June TBR. So I don't usually make a TBR. That's not entirely true. I usually write down a 2 to 3 book TBR in my reading journal of books that I already own that I want to get to, and I almost never stick to it. So I can't stick to a 2 or 3 book long TBR, but this month I am going to be bringing you a 9 book long TBR because I am participating in a readathon with the Shelf Space Discord, and I really want to be sure that I can kind of hit all the prompts that I need to hit. And there are actually 16 prompts in this readathon, but I'm going to be reading various shorter books, some middle grade books, some comic books, and so I didn't include those on this June TBR. Today I just want to talk about the fantasy books that I am planning to read in the month of June. So there are 9 books that I'm hoping to get to. I have explained to my family that I will be reading almost all the time this month, so we'll see how that goes. But I am really hopeful that I'll be able to get to these, and I hope that there's not going to be a lot of shuffling of the books either. So if you're looking forward to hearing about any of the ones that I list, hopefully by the end of the month I will have some thoughts to share with you. The very first book that I'm going to be reading is part of a read-along on Alan's Discord on the Library of Alexandria, and that is Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. This is a book that I have had on my shelf for a really long time and that I have wanted to read for a really long time, but for some reason I have never gotten around to it. This is a classic work of fantasy. I believe it was published in the 90s, but it may also have been the late 80s. But I think it was the 90s. Guy Gavriel Kay is a Canadian fantasy author, and the story of Tigana is the story of a kingdom or a group of people who have been placed under a curse. And part of that curse is that the name of their once beautiful and bountiful land is scrubbed from everyone's memory to be forgotten. And I think the story takes place years after this has happened, and a group of men and women are rising up to fight the conquering force and to restore that name to their land. And the name that they are trying to restore is Tigana. I have heard a lot of great things about this book. I think it is a favorite standalone for a lot of people. When I did my fantasy masterclass video about prose, a lot of people gave me the recommendation of reading Guy Gavriel Kay. His prose is supposed to be very beautiful, and that is something that I always appreciate in a fantasy novel. So I am really looking forward to getting around to this one. Book number 2 is a reread for me, so I will be continuing with my Dark Tower reread with the Wastelands. I am just about finished with The Drawing of the Three, which is the second book in the Dark Tower, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the Wastelands. The Wastelands is a really common fan favorite, but I remember I've only read The Wastelands one time, and I remember it feeling like it dragged a little bit for me. So I don't know if that has to do with the age that I was when I read it. Maybe I read them very closely back to back. I don't really remember. But I do remember feeling as if The Wastelands dragged a little bit, and it was never my favorite. I always preferred The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Three, and Wizard and Glass to The Wastelands in terms of those first 4 novels. So I'm very excited for my reread of this one because I think there's a lot that maybe I've forgotten, some little details that I've forgotten about this volume. So really, really looking forward to getting back into that. The third book that I put on my TBR for this month is a 2021 release, and that is a book called The Black Coast. And so this is a book about a group or a settlement, a kingdom that is situated along a coast. And as the novel opens, they see ships on the horizons, and they believe that they are being raided by one of their age-old enemies. So they suit up their war dragons, that is what it says in the description, war dragons, which sounds amazing, and go out in anticipation of a fight. But what they actually find is that this old enemy has been driven from their land by an evil demonic power, demonic force. And so they have to settle amongst their old enemies and create this new society or this new population made up of these 2 groups of people. And in the background of all of this, in the greater continent on which they live, it seems like the continent is slowly edging towards war. So this new settlement will have to try to find a way to live together and work together if they're going to survive the upcoming war. I don't usually go in for seafaring novels. Pirate stories or stories at sea are not usually my favorite type of book to read, but one of the prompts in this readathon is a book set at sea, and so I saw this one on the list of 2021 releases. I hadn't heard a lot of people talk about it, so I thought it might be nice to read it to fulfill that prompt, but also to have a 2021 book to talk about that I haven't heard a lot of buzz about. So I'm really hoping that I will enjoy this one and that it will end up being a really great 2021 read and something that I can share with all of you. We will kick back to Stephen King for number 4 on this list. So I'm also hoping to read his book Firestarter, which made my video of 5-star predictions for 2021. So I made a video listing all the 5-star predictions I have for books that I want to read near in the future. And so Firestarter fits one of the prompts for this readathon. It seems like it's short, it's going to be easy to flick through, which are all great qualities in terms of when you're trying to read a lot of books in 1 month. And I'm really looking forward to it. This is the story of a young girl named Charlie who has inherited pyrokinetic powers from her parents, who I believe were some sort of scientific experiment for the government. And because she has inherited these powers, the government is on the move. They're trying to catch her. And I think the story follows that chase. So can Charlie escape? How is she going to use her powers? I love Stephen King. I thought that this would be an easy 5 stars for me, and I'm really looking forward to reading it and seeing how it plays out. So I have a couple of 2021 new releases to follow up on the list, the first of which is Brother Red by Adrian Selby. This is a standalone grimdark fantasy novel that was released early in the year, and I believe it follows a young woman who is, I don't know if she's on some sort of quest or adventure, but she discovers a dead body in a barrel, I think is what it says on the back of the book. And so when she discovers this body, she finds out that it actually belongs to this elusive, high-ranking race of people and is actually worth quite a lot of money. And as she begins to investigate or try to figure out the mystery behind this dead body, what she finds herself embroiled in is a scheme that will have long-lasting impacts on the kingdom, on the empire that she lives in, and obviously will put her in grave danger as well. I have heard that this one is really gritty, really dark, so I don't know if it might end up being a little bit too dark for me, but I'm always down to discover a new fantasy standalone, and I've been trying to keep up to date with some 2021 releases so that I can have some new books to mix in with the older books that I talk about. So I am looking forward to reading this one. If you've had the chance to pick it up, then please let me know what you thought about it. The next book that I want to talk about is actually an ARC that I was granted, so I'm very grateful for that opportunity, and that book is The Hand of the Sun King by J.T. Greathouse. This is a book that Patrick has talked about a lot over on his channel. He has said that it is his favorite debut of 2021, and he feels like it is going to continue to be his favorite debut from 2021, and that is very high praise. So I'm really excited to read this one and see how I feel about it, how it measures up against the other new releases that I have read from this year. And I believe that the story, the blurb that they give on the book is very vague, which I actually like because I don't like knowing too much about the story before I go in. But essentially it sounds like the setup is that there is a son who is caught between the warring ideologies of his two parents. So he has his dad who can trace his ancestry all the way back to the forging of the empire in which they live. And then he has his mother who is very sympathetic to the resistance movement that is rising up against the empire. And I guess our main character is trying to determine his place in the world. And what he discovers is that maybe he can carve out his own spot for himself. And that is a path that follows the path of magic. And this will keep him separate from those other two warring ideologies, but will send him off on a quest or into a future that is filled with danger and the unknown and the opportunity to discover what kind of person he really is. The cover on this book is beautiful, and honestly, even if Patrick hadn't had such good things to say about it, just from this beautiful cover alone, I would have been really tempted to read it. So I'm glad that he had such a good experience with it because that makes me go into it expecting to really enjoy it. Next, I have a couple of continuations of series that I have started over the last little while. So the first one is Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett. So this is the second death novel in his Discworld novels. I have just started Discworld. I don't know if this video is going to go up before or after my May wrap up, but Mort, the first death book in the Discworld, will be on my May wrap up. So I'll talk a little bit about how I felt about that book. But obviously I liked it enough to move on to the next one. I'm really looking forward to getting to read through these death books, and I am really looking forward to getting to discover more of Discworld. It is a series that used to always intimidate me because it was so long and there were so many books. And I really had no idea how they were interconnected, if you had to read like 1 to 30 whatever in a row. And Alan's video at the Library of Alexandria breaking down how to approach Discworld was so helpful for me and gave me the confidence I needed to get started, and I'm really, really glad that I did. So I'm looking forward to reading the next death book in June as well. The other sequel books that I have planned to read are the second Greatcoats book by Sebastian de Castell. So that's called Knightshadow, and that is book 2 in his Greatcoats series. I won't give a summary for the book because, again, it is a sequel, so I don't want to spoil anything for book 1. But all I can say is that this is an adventure fantasy that definitely has some very gritty, dark, and emotional parts. What I have really been enjoying, what I really loved from book 1 was these strong friendships. Unlike a lot of fantasy books where I feel like authors tell me that I need to be really invested in a friendship because these two people understand each other so much and they're such great friends, I could see the friendships between the characters in this Greatcoats, in the first Greatcoats book. I could see it in the first chapters, just the way that he writes the banter between them, the way that they interact with each other felt very true to life in terms of how real friends maneuver around one another. So I am so looking forward to continuing in this series. The first book was a very quick read, and I'm sure the others will be the same. I love adventure fantasy, and the main character of this series, Falkio, has already stolen my heart. So I am really looking forward to going on with this one. The other follow-up or sequel novel that I would like to read is Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. So this is the second book in her Aurelian cycle, which is a highly political fantasy novel. It's a YA political fantasy novel. And again, I don't really want to talk spoilers about the first volume, but this is essentially the world that these books are set in is a post-revolutionary war where we follow two main characters, although I think another point of view character comes in book 2. But in the first one, we follow two characters who have come from very different backgrounds. They were both orphaned by this revolution. One comes from the high-ranking nobility, one comes from the peasantry, and it's about their relationship with each other, how they grew up, how they impacted each other's lives, and how their pasts have formed them into the people that they are. It talks a lot about the consequences of revolution, about how you build up a populace, how you control a populace. And I guess ultimately the question that this series of books is trying to ask is the regime that follows the revolution, are they any better than what they were trying to replace? Or do we as human beings, do we inevitably follow a path of destruction, essentially? But I really enjoyed the first one. I probably didn't have as much love for it as some of the other booktubers that I've seen talk about it, but political fantasy is not my favorite thing. So I think it does what it does really well, and I am intrigued enough to continue on with the series and figure out where it goes from here. The very last fantasy book on my TBR is a reread of Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Weiss and Hickman. This is the very first Dragonlance book in Dragonlance Chronicles, and I am really excited. I'm reading this with a group of friends whose channels I can link below in the description, and we have a group chat, a voice chat ongoing where so far we haven't discussed the book because we haven't started it, but we've been kind of getting to know each other's reading preferences and getting pumped up for this read along. So I am really excited to go back. This is a book that I talked about in my Nostalgia Goggles video. So a book that I really loved when I was younger and I want to reread to see how I feel about it now. I know Dragonlance was an early fantasy staple for so many of us, so it's going to be really interesting to go back and reread it, especially now that I've had a lot more experience with modern fantasy and have been able to see how fantasy has evolved and changed over the past couple of decades. So really looking forward to that reread. If you have read the Dragonlance Chronicles, please let me know below, or any of the Dragonlance books, then let me know, because I'd love to know your thoughts about it, if they were kind of early influences for you as well. But that is the end of this TBR video. This is an elusive video. I don't know if you'll see many more like it, because I don't tend to stick to TBRs very well, and I don't like to get people's hopes up that I'm going to read something if it's not going to happen. But I really and truly do plan to read most, if not all, of the books on this list. If you have read any of them, if you are looking forward to any of them, please let me know. I would love to hear from you, and I hope that you all have a great reading month in June. I'll see you with another video soon. Bye!